All right, welcome again, H Radio 123 part-timers to week 9 of radio. Right, okay. And we are focusing specifically on creating content this week, as we probably will be for the next couple of weeks as we move up to your summative assessment at the end of the semester. So yeah, what a ride, right? What a ride it's been already. Okay, so I just want to kind of pre prefix this as a bit of a disclaimer. When you go look at, and I don't want to go ahead in lessons because again, I'm going to have nothing to do at the end of the semester, of which I have a lesson or two planned, particularly for obviously revision and for direction and for obviously the summative itself. But you will see that when you do go to Cole Campus and you do download lesson 19 and 20, that they are replicas of one another because of the fact that we are, like I said, we're talking about this holistically. All right. So again, very a short lesson. I do want to go to a couple of. So again, what I've said to you is I'm going to show you some of the snap content that we came up with. One, particularly an interview, and another one being an anecdote. So in other words, a personal story. But I do want to also segue that with a couple of reminders from Tracy Johnson with some of the material that we have been covering so far. So I'm going to stop the share. I'm actually going to go to the videos to a first video here. We'll go to an example, to a second video. We'll come back with another example, right? All right, so let's have a look at Tracy. Okay, this is Grant's. I mean, like we all, Grant loves Tracy Johnson. He is very good as well, and so you'll see a lot of the material from your workbooks, right? Your text, yeah, from the textbook itself. So
Okay, so the first
keep quiet. For a second, dude. Let me shine. All right. Will come from some of Tracy Johnson's guidance in terms of, him and like for example, the gift systems was his, and you can see that and again. Kind of recall that from lessons just before. I think it was the lesson maybe 2 lessons ago, right? All right, so let's watch these videos as Tracy will give us direct context on Q and A. Enjoy.
one says, I do a story-based feature every time. Are you saying that I shouldn't do any more stories on my show and let that be the S because I don't have enough breaks to do another story? Now, I'm not saying that at all, but let's say you do second date update every hour at 10 and 20 after the hour. So you've got story on the first half of the hour, every hour on your show. That's a lot of story already. So you probably want to go lighter on story, lighter on the S in the other breaks because you want to represent the other types of content. But remember, I said that every time you open the mic, every time you talk, you are telling a story. You're a storyteller, whether it's in a funny break or an information break or a games break. So I would just say that if you're doing that, if you're doing a story-based feature and it's on every hour and it's on in 2 different quarter hours, then the other parts of the quarter of the hour should probably be in the information and something funny that's going on there as well. Now, a lot of times funny is infused across the show. It doesn't have to be a feature. It doesn't have to be, okay, let's set aside some time and be funny now. It could be that funny is infused into second date update into your story-based feature. So that's the ideal way to use that. But you do want to make sure that you keep some balance. Question from Dale is, this may be a dumb question, but how many breaks are we talking per hour? I'm in an off time, roughly 4 breaks per hour. 4 breaks per hour is pretty standard. I liked, yeah, well, in talking about building clocks, and I've got a whole seminar on clock construction. I like personalities to have a very frequent presence on the air, but that doesn't mean a lot of full breaks. I think the personalities should be on every 5 to 6 minutes throughout the hour, but that doesn't mean you're doing a full break every 5 or 6 minutes. I think 4 breaks, 1 per quarter hour, positioned properly is just about right. 4 big content breaks. But along with that, there's a lot of the sense of today. Maybe you've got a couple of information updates that are in addition to that, maybe it's coming out of a stop set. You're talking over an intro, you're doing some teases, you're doing some, I call them handshake breaks, where you're reflecting the audience. Maybe you're maintenancing a topic that you've got going on from one break to the next. Let's say you start a phone topic. During the information break, you start a phone topic, invite the audience to participate. You put between the next two songs, you are giving them a tease with a couple of things that people have said already. Then you go into the first big break, but you've talked about it 5 or 6 times, which gives it a much larger presence. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about personality presence. I think personalities don't have nearly enough presence, enough significance on the air, as much as they could and as much as they should. I think a lot of times that is a function of a program director's clock or interpretation of a clock, that I only want you talking during the breaks and you got to keep it really short. But you don't have to do it that way. I mean, there are a lot of ways that you can have a presence, a lot of ways that you can make that connection with the audience without replacing the song count. So I think that's really, really important. Darren says, I do a daily topic with listener reaction and run the phone through 1 full hour and dedicate that hour to the topic and calls. Is this a good idea to focus the hour or spread it out over the show? Like Darren, this is a really good way of doing this. And I've got a couple of shows now who are doing that as well. Now, they're not doing a daily topic. They're doing an hourly topic. For the most part, where every hour you start with a new topic, you introduce it, and you spread it through the hour. So there's a presence of that topic every time you open the mic. You go into your information break, and before you do it, you maintenance that topic. Hey, we're talking about this morning. Here's our phone number. Can't wait for you to hear Brian's call. Is coming up here in a couple of minutes. But first, here's an update on what's happening in the world today, and you do your information break. Coming out of the information break, you maintenance it again, and you're continuing the conversation, continuing the topic through a full hour. So anytime I jump in on it, I can participate on it. And then the next hour, it's gone and you turn it over and do something else. I've also got a show that does a story-based feature, and we're doing the same story-based feature every hour, but every hour we do it, we take a different angle on it. And so we're able to use some of the phone calls that have come in earlier and the way that we want that conversation to go. So I would tell you that if you're taking one topic and spreading it through the entire show, then I would make sure that you're taking a different angle on that topic every time that you do it. Because otherwise, if I happen to have heard it before and I come back later and I'm tuned in again, okay, I've heard this already, been there, done that. But if it's the same topic, but a different story from that topic, a whole different angle, it's a different perspective, it's like a new episode in a series. And there can be some story arc qualities that come from that. And that can be highly valuable as well. Next question comes from Sherry, who says that she is frustrated with her show because she feels that she is funny and can be funny, but isn't given an opportunity to be funny because she doesn't have a partner and she's on a solo show. Okay, so that makes it more challenging for sure. It is a lot easier to make funny things happen when you're on a team show, or when you've got someone that's feeding something back to you, that's teeing it up, that's giving you some sort of a stimulus and input. There's a lot of things that you can do with that. Use the listeners as your co-host. And by the way, I'll promote my phone calls seminar again. I've got both an ebook that you can get at tjohnsonmediagroup.com. It's called Listeners as Co-Hosts, and another seminar called Fill Your Phone Lines at insidersradionetwork.com. But both talk about how you can use listeners as your co-hosts, use listeners to set it up, and how you can recruit listeners, and use some of those recurring listeners that call all the time and use them as co-hosts to interact with, and that can set you up so funny things can happen. You can also look for characters. A lot of times, those annoying characters who call you all the time and annoy you, you can use them a lot as co-hosts, because they will say some things that are outrageous and funny and will start a conversation, and it puts you when you're on with somebody else. But there are some amazing personalities who sound so conversational. They sound so one-to-one. A couple of them this seminar today. One is Corey Dillon from Big here in San Diego, Big 100.7 here in San Diego, who will be at Morning Show Boot Camp. You got to look her up when you're there. But she's so conversational and so natural. You would never know that she was on the air by herself. It sounds like she's having a conversation with you. And another, I'm not sure if Lisa Berry is on or not, but Lisa, it has the same qualities. Lisa sounds like she's always in a conversation with you. And when you're in that situation, when you sound like you're having a conversation and you're naturally funny, you'll find ways to let that personality and let that sense of humor come out through that conversation that you're having, even when you're on by yourself. So harder on a solo show, no doubt. Impossible? Not at all. You can do it. You just have to work at it a little bit more and a little bit differently. Question is, what can be added to a do you think A or do you think B type of topic to make it interesting for the listeners? It seems once you've aired someone from each side, subsequent calls aren't adding entertainment value, perhaps using ringers to add more depth, context, rewarding content to their A or B response. Great question. And I thought about going into a little bit more detail when I presented that, because normally the last thing you want to do is ask a poll question on the air. You don't want to ask a yes/no question because it leads to a yes/no answer. And that is, as you point out, boring. You want to have an open-ended question that leads to stories. So you want to say, what should happen here? What's the next move? What happens next? What about this? What do you think of this? So you have the conversation, you have the debate. But if you want a resolution, you could end up where one of the personalities on the show says, women who stay at home should be responsible for taking care of the kids and make sure the house is clean when her husband comes home. That happened on one of the shows that I work with on the air this morning. And personality B says, are you kidding? That's the most old-fashioned Stone Age point of view ever. They should have a real life. So you've got people with different points of view. You can boil, okay, so what do you think? If it becomes A or B, if it becomes one or the other, which is it going to be? So you can turn a longer conversation that's happening over multiple breaks into a poll to tie it up and have a resolution. Now, a lot of these phone topics don't need a resolution. The end of great timing on that question. It didn't need to be resolved by the end of the hour. Sometimes we'll bank what we think is the best call and save it for the end to give some sort of resolution so we can move on to something else. I kind of just said that. I do not think all topics need to be resolved. In fact, I don't think most topics need to be resolved. There are some where a resolution is necessary and a resolution is welcome. I think that all topics need to have an end. They need to have a high point. They need to have an exit, but they don't have to have a solution. It doesn't have to have an outcome necessarily. If you do have an outcome,
I'm just trying to sync this here, so apologies for that.
And they need to have a high point. They need to have an exit, but they don't have to have a resolution. It doesn't have to have really. If you do have an outcome, I think it can be a cherry on top for some of them. But I kind of said the same thing in the last question. Now, I want to point out one other thing in this. A lot of times we'll take the best call and save it for the end. I think that's a mistake. I do think the end of a break needs to be a high point that leaves the audience excited, interested, looking forward, wanting to hear more. But I don't think that saving your best call for the end is a good move. I would rather use the best call first, because there's a much greater chance of everybody hearing it, and you're going to get the conversation off to a really fast start. So if you have a great call right away, maybe it's a ringer or someone that you've set up or someone that you use from another station to get a topic going, don't save it for the end. Use it at the beginning because there will be more people there at the end if it starts fast. So always start with something fast that hooks the audience, that gets them engaged, that gets them excited, that gets them interested, and keeps them actively participating. There's a much better chance to keep you all the way through. Chuck mentions in the chat that you can also tell your stories using different voices. Yeah, you're right, you can. And I think Chuck's not saying it's not like a Phil Hendry using physical different voices, but in a different voice. So you can tell a story saying, hey, this happened to my kid. So my kid came home from school and told me this, or this happened to my brother or my neighbor, or what would you do if this happened to you? This happened to a guy at work. Or you can tell it in third person. You could take an interesting story that happened in Boise and say, imagine this were you and this took place. And so you can tell the story through those voices too. I think that's probably what Chuck is getting at there. But yeah, using different voices and different tenses and different perspectives can create multiple stories. And by the way, that's a trick in storytelling. You can take the same story and maybe there's 3 characters in the story. Maybe there's a mom and her kid and a teacher at school. If you take that same story and the same facts that are in the story and tell that story through each of those 3 perspectives, you have a very different story. So now you can pick the best story. Which one's going to come off the best? Telling it from different angles.
All right. So just one thing to actually point out that for example, because the thing is that oddly enough, right, just oddly enough, when we spoke about like how to place callers before, and that came from your textbook, and that actually came from Tracy Johnson. And I do understand that people do change their opinion as they move along and grow throughout their own journey as a professional. But there was a little bit of a contradiction as to why it is that you would put, let's say, a strong caller first. Again, for me personally, from my thing, is that you should always put great callers at any one given time, right? And I think that, not I think I know, if you place this, here's my perspective, right? Okay. If you place the best caller first and you go down, like let's say you put a lower quality caller or a less exciting caller, you're gonna be like, oh, like there's an anticlimax at the end of the day. Again, a safeguarded rule for that would be then to say, listen, yeah, like what I would like to do at the end of the day is be able to put like great callers on regardless of what it is that I am busy
First question
doing.
was
Sorry. Uh, just give me a second. I just want to pause in there for a second. We'll come back to some bits of Tracy Johnson, but I want to quickly share with you just where a little update as to where we are with the snap exercise, right? So here I'm going to the second one with you and cover the second one and how to actually run or construct an interview, which you did here in the previous lesson. We spoke. Well, I played you some from a piece from Kula and a piece from Nicole. But there is construction to everything, right? Okay. And in first year, I don't expect you to make it at all to this extent. So this is at a third year level. We're looking at different angles and ultimate callers, etc. Right? But I do expect you to know how to build again a hook, crumbs, dress up, a payoff, and then a blackout. Right? But I want you to see a little bit of the variation as to like how these links can be split up over into 2 parts, and then the payoff becomes a little bit of what we can also call in, maybe obviously what we are getting from the interview itself, right? So just with school studies, I wanted to actually talk to professionals about how to apply yourself for every class to get the most out of your learning, and then how to apply yourself to get the most out of your profession, right? With ultimate callers, again, what is an ultimate caller? When we're trying to construct like reasoning for why it is that we're going to build this, think like what would a caller respond to? What would their situation be? And then also, if we do have a question, we would say, okay, listen, this is like, do we have answers? And really, very easy to think of, but original and diverse answers that make obviously our piece a lot more interesting, right? So we'll get to the questions in just a moment. What are we going to do? We're going to bring in Grant Nash, who's our academic manager for radio and the top student in radio for 2023 Duma, right? So when I did get some I did need some guidance in terms of I wanted to do some research and whatever. I came across a great blog post from Amber's student, which gave me a little bit of a reflection as to what it is that students face as terms of problems of blocking themselves, like being obstacles to themselves, right? So let's quickly go through this example, right? So the hook is where we grab that attention, right? So picture this. You've just you come home from an all-nighter Sunday morning, your focus priorities, which are one, food. Of course, you need that leftover double quarter pounder with cheese. Two, that series all of a Sunday, you need to start binge watching. And of course, three, this goes without saying, you're going to pass out pretty soon after that, right? And tomorrow, of course, is the start of submission week. At some or other point in the crumb, so now I'm giving some context, right, as to why I'm saying this as a hook, right? So at some other point, let me just go back here. At some other point, this has been or is or was considering the past week that we had our submission weekend, it was probably you, right? So no shame being obviously casted out on you, but let's be real. This is not how you live your best hashtag student life. When I generated a simple Google AI search for the most common problems a student has to deal with, it cited, amongst others, a focus on depression, low motivation, lack of sleep and concentration, weak understanding and grasp of basic organization within their life, to even an ability, which surprised me here, of selecting a major within the correct time frame. So that you are at varsity and you are maybe at the end of your first year, your second year, and you haven't even thought about like your direction and what you want to specialize in. That's really surprising for me. In studio today, to clarify matters of this nature, right? We have academic manager of radio at BMH Santon, Scott Nash, who also is the co-author of Next Level Radio and program director at Prime Media Broadcasting. We're also joined by last year's top radio student, Dumas Zweni, who's currently program manager at Boston Broadcast. We want to talk about applying yourself, how to apply yourself for every class to get the most out of your learning, and how to apply yourself to get the most out of your profession. See that dress up coming in there, right? So what I did is a line of questioning. When you do a line of questioning in interviews, again, you must have some kind of idea as to what it is that you're going to ask them. We did speak before about how you need to obviously cultivate conversation the way that it goes, the way that it flows to make it a conversation. But you have to come in knowing your train of thought. And what we really want to focus on here is about that kind of like the student that wants to move, that wants to scale up, right, in what they are busy, not currently where they are. They might not be performing very well. They might be, which is very, I mean, it's a very big reality. The students really start their assignments late, which is not the right attitude. And maybe also, again, why isn't it the correct attitude? Because what is it in terms of implications of you and your student life, right? You as a student growing. So I directed certain questions to Duma and Summit Grant. Duma, I said you were a student yourself. You've also told us that your social life is not something you took lightly. Achieving a healthy balance between that and your obligations as a student took exactly what? The second question goes to Grant. For an academic point of purpose, in what ways is the BMH learning lifestyle in what ways is the BMH learning lifestyle supported by college infrastructure, right? So have we cultivated some kind of, again, some ethos here, and again, some culture here on campus, and in what ways? Because I don't think a lot of students actually know. So, Grant, what is the gap, if any, between what we are being cultivated as media professionals on campus? So, you would imagine a student is running this interview versus what a media professional is currently expected from in the industry. For Grant, three pieces of advice you should never listen to. Right, so a student should never ever listen to. And Duma, what does an effective student look like as opposed to one that isn't? And so give me that in terms of walking, talking, thinking, acting, feeling, being, right? So here is the payoff number one. Again, So here we're saying this is what we want to actually answer within obviously interview. Now we're opening up to the line. So if you're fighting a battle with your potentially best self, right? So you're standing between you and yourself, and want to ask these two pros here in studio for some clarity on a way forward. All you need to do is text us at 084 777 or send a voice note. I play music and then I would come back to part two where I'd recap, very important to recap what we're talking about, who's in studio, and well, let's go to the lines and see who we're talking to right now, okay? Which is, again, these ultimate callers that are cited over here. You know, for example, how did Marx make a difference in your impression on the industry? Um, Grant, I definitely know that my depression is impacting my motivation, confidence, and follow through in my academics, etc. What must I do first thing when I get to campus tomorrow? And Grant, like, why don't I get picked for a job? Like, what's the deal there? All right, after we've done that, the blackout is a variation of what we did before, where before it was just, let's say, giving the phone number, right? Here on campus, you can always seek the help of our campus counselor. And for any inquiries on how to get in touch with that person, for him or her, right, mail currica at boston.co.za. If you want to listen to this interview again, it's going to be up as a podcast on bostonbroadcast.co.za by the end of the day. Pretty much radio, see ya, Jive. Right. Okay. So let's go to another. We're going to do this one, and then we'll end off now. But I want to play one more video from Tracy. I don't. Let's. Oh, did I stop? Let me stop the share. What did I pick? I hope I picked the right. I hope I did pick that. I can't even remember now. My word. Anyway. Okay. Here we go. I want to look at the crumbs. So let's look at the crumbs. Let's leave the hook for the moment here. This Q&A is quite long. But let's look at this little short video on the crumbs. 2-minute tips. And let's have a look at that first. Let's get this out of the way. Just give it a second to load, please.
Most personalities spend a lot of time in preparation on the payoff. Now, a single strong exit isn't enough to hang on to the audience. Think about this. What if you're doing an 8-minute set and you've got one joke that happens at the end? Doesn't matter how good the joke is, no matter how funny it is, after 8 minutes, the audience is gone. Yet on the radio, personalities spend most of their prep time just figuring out the payoff. But listeners are constantly evaluating content, and they lose interest when it's too long between mini payoffs. That's what I call breadcrumbs, and they have to be dropped to keep listeners engaged. Breadcrumbs are nuggets, mini payoffs that keep it interesting, which also helps with building momentum into a story. Now here's the danger. Listeners reevaluate the content every 30 to 45 seconds, and they make decisions on whether this content is worthwhile. The same way you probably channel surf on TV. How long do you give a channel to get your attention before moving on? That's why you can't just wing it and hope for the best. So what's a breadcrumb? It's telling your story in a way that constantly raises the stakes, introducing a new element on a regular basis. It's something that surprises the listener with something unexpected. Let me show you how listeners respond. Check this out. This is a graph of a radio show's content showing the moment-by-moment response to what they're hearing on the air. They're using dial tests. Now each test starts right at 50 and goes as high as 100 or as low as 0. There's mild interest in this break, but it just never really gets going. It stays between 40 and 60 on the scale, right in the middle. Nothing happening here. It doesn't go anywhere. Now in all, the break only lasts 3 minutes and 19 seconds. But half of the audience had tuned out. Half. Can you afford to lose half of your audience in such a short period of time? Now, there's nothing wrong with the topic. It was compelling. But the execution is flat and it just didn't get traction. And half the audience has gone for the punchline. Now, compare that to this break. This shows a great hook. Look how fast it starts. Strong, quick start. Interest spikes immediately. The first 2 minutes are highly compelling. This has promise because there's breadcrumb after breadcrumb. That's a really strong statement, a really strong segment. That shows why you need a fast start, but also breadcrumbs that will get listeners all the way through the break to your great payoff.
Okay. Give that a sec. Obviously, as you know, it's hanging just a little bit there. Oh, there it's done. Okay. All right. So let me fix that off. Close that off there. All right. I'm just going to stop that share and we'll do a little bit of this, just kind of end the lecture. So I want to just share again our next piece, which is an anecdote. So I try to keep it very simple because it's an anecdote. I just wanted to make it, again, a different approach. Again, with all these separate examples, I want to, like I say, I want to take a different road so you can see how content can actually be developed, right? All right, so the topic is surprising ways to find out that you're actually more like your parents than you originally thought. So the first and second angle is right, like whether your behavioral influence actually comes from your parents, right? What are your quirks and idiosyncrasies? So the way that maybe you eat your food, maybe you separate each element on the plate, and the way you have a snort in your laugh, just like maybe your mom. What do you literally inherit to a genetic level from your mom or your dad or both, right? So ultimate callers in this case, I would like to hear so I can construct the payoff. I'm courageously spontaneous like my dad. We literally just go with the flow, which explains why I landed up in George last weekend, skydiving over the coast. Two, my short fuse is my mom, 10,000%, right? But we get it. If you don't get to the point, we'll point you in the opposite direction. Ultimate quarter three, both my mom and dad and I love spicy food. If you can still feel your tongue, it's not hard enough, right? So if we go from there, just so you can understand, so these are not the callers that I'm imagining I want. These are ultimate callers, right? My payoff here actually works, right? So again, I'm asking, what are the quirks? Tell me, what is it, these different aspects about you and your parents that you have in common? So, all right, here's the hook. Here's why you're going to, or already are, land up like a mini me version of your mom and dad. And I will play a little excerpt from this YouTube video that's super interesting, but I'll make sure that it's quite short, 30 to 45 seconds, right? Crumbs. Occasionally, we are surprised when our behavior resembles memories of a parent behaving similarly, a vocal inflection, maybe, a mannerism, a personality quirk may resonate with the likeness of your own parent, or perhaps even someone from your past, like an uncle or an aunt. You never know. Your own undesirable behaviors also could remind you of behavior that your parental figures obviously had and you experienced as a child. Here's the dress up here. On social media, we at the station, so at BMH Radio, ran a poll on our socials this morning asking simply, who are you more like? A, your mom, B, your dad. At 87% of Boston broadcast listeners said mom, 23% said dad. I am in the 87% there. Yay, mom. No offense to my dad, I love my dad. But if I look at my mom, which is something we really only connected, something that we really only connected over in the past 3 or 4 years, is our shared need for order and control. Anything other than that is where, personally, for me, and now I see it obviously in her, understand that it's always been there, is chronic anxiety and potential mania. That's where it comes from. She's exactly the same. But as an adult, okay, so this is a bit of a repeat for me. I take this out here. I take this out here. Let me just quickly check that out. Oh, wait, I can't. I'm enabling. I would take that out here. This is just a bit of a repetition. I hate chaos. Just to reiterate, I also do not do well within chaos. So I'm super pedantic about knowing that I have some resemblance of control in every situation, just like mom, right? Doesn't matter how irrational I may sound or manic, I don't care. I just want some order. On a physical attribute or physical context, I have her eyes, her skin tone, very light white, and I am a short person, a lack of height. Right, I was going to move that out. That was supposed to be up there. Okay. So, what are the quirks, the idiosyncrasies, the way that you eat your food? Here's the payoff. Like, again, separating each element on the plate, snorting when you laugh, literally inheriting those genetics from your mom and your dad. Why don't you send us a voice note to 084 777 0101 and you're listening to Beer BMH radio. Yeah, driver. Right, I just want to kind of fix that. All right, great. I hope you did understand that. Stop that share. And let's do one more piece from the last video, which is all about hooks, just to get us up to speed, Tracy Johnson style. Let's listen to some.
Yeah. I referenced in the seminar the 7-second rule. And I use 7 seconds because listener attention is seconds. So that means you've got 7 seconds to hold their attention, or at least not lose their attention. And Rizzo and Jeff say we agree. It's more about how you open the break and how it's creating fear of missing out and appointments and payoffs or tease and move forward. The question is regarding drive time shows. So specifically wanted to find out more about the 8-second rule. And I want to go into a little bit more detail on that because I've changed my philosophy on the 8-second rule and how to hook audiences. And I think a lot of personalities and a lot of programmers have misapplied that information. I believe that 7-second rule is very real. It's a real thing. If you don't hold listeners' attention very quickly, you will never keep it through a talk segment. And I can go into great detail. I'm going to publish an article on my website tomorrow that talks about a little bit more depth about how different media treat the 7-second rule and how they try to convert existing attention into future attention more effectively. And that applies to every personality when they turn on the microphone. But I think for a long time, programmers have interpreted that and taken it to heart, and with very good intentions have caused personalities to slam into that next content. And it's not very polite. In fact, it's really kind of rude. I call it punching them in the face. So instead of shaking hands, we're punching them in the face. So I've softened my approach on the 7-second rule. I now coach personalities that you have 7 seconds to not lose attention that you already have. And that's very different than 7 seconds to get attention going forward. You just can't lose that attention. So if you can have a handshake there, something that acknowledges the listener's world, that positions where you're going with the segment, you don't have to slam into the hook immediately in those first couple of words that come out of your mouth. Shake hands, the audio version of shaking hands. Connect with the listeners in their environment. Then transition into a quick hook. That's the best way to do it. So you're transitioning. Otherwise, your radio station sounds like it's block programmed. Okay, the music's over. Now it's time for talk. Okay, the talk's over. Now it's time for news. Okay, the news is over. Now it's time for commercials. Now the commercials are over. It's time for music. And there needs to be a flow to all of that if you're going to hold listeners from one segment to another. Next one is not about hooks, and we'll get back to the questions in chat about hooks, but it's about true radio. Is it true that radio is not a popularity contest, or is that false? Because the last time I checked it was, and that's what drove ratings up, in which rose the sales. Am I on the right track here? Yeah, well, sure, radio is a popularity contest, absolutely. Radio is measured, if you're talking about the PPM markets, radio is measured by who is the most listeners, who's listening the most and who's listening the longest. Now, if you want to really dumb that down to the way a lot of programmers think, is that it doesn't matter if people remember who the personalities are, and if it doesn't matter if they remember what station they're listening to, as long as they're listening to your station, because you're getting ratings credit at the time. I think that it couldn't be farther from the truth. In the PPM world, it's more important than ever to brand your station and brand your personality, because tune out does happen, because there are more and more options for listeners to go somewhere else all the time. They know what those options are and they're quick to use them. And if they're tuning out, if they're going somewhere else, what's going to bring them back? Those stations and those personalities who are most top of mind and have specific reasons to come back. And that's why branding, especially, and being the winner of a popularity contest is so critical today. And it's, I believe it's more important than ever to be high profile, to be prominent, and to know the specific reasons why people would come to you. And it's also harder to stick out. So branding, I think, is very, very important. In the chat earlier during the seminar, Tony Bristol asked about how you set up the payoff without sounding contrived. I hope that I answered that as the seminar went on. I think that I did. Especially as I started talking a little bit about how you plan the payoff first. What is this break really about? What's the content about? What's the story I'm telling about? And the story I'm telling isn't about the topic. It's about something inside the story. Later this week, I'm going to update some information on good news segments. Good news segments are really, really popular, but it's hard to make someone care about a story that they don't, that isn't relevant to them. So there's only so many stories about heroes who do something, firefighters who do something good for a sick kid that you can go to before it starts to sound redundant. And, how do you capture attention? But the stories are usually inside a topic that you already know about. I'm going to write some more about that a little bit later. So finding that emotional essence and then telling is where your payoff's going to come from. So if you establish the payoff first, then write a compelling, emotionally charged hook that points to but doesn't give away that payoff. And then write a tease is the number 3 thing. Write a tease that points to the hook but doesn't give the hook away. And all the things in the middle kind of come together. So I painted that picture. I don't know if I went into enough detail there, but that's how you do that to not sound contrived and not sound like you're going too far out of the way. Next question is also from Tony, who says, what is more important, leave them laughing going into spots or teasing them after the laugh about what to expect next? I'll point you to a teasing seminar that I have available on demand. If you're an insider, there's 2 teasing seminars, the Art of the Tease 1 and Art of the Tease 2. Art of the Tease 1 is the philosophy behind teasing, and that's where you'll find the details on this, but I'll give you some of the highlights. You can also buy that on demand at tjohnsonmediagroup.com. The best time to tease forward is when you have the audience at a high point. When you have them laughing, when you really hit a high point and you hit it out of the park, what better time to tease and to get them to listen to another segment than when it's at its absolute peak? So don't blow the opportunity. Leave them laughing and transition. And there's a lot of ways to transition. Some personalities are great at transitioning with their voice. It's almost like an audio gear shift, where you're laughing 1 minute, continuing to laugh, you're still in the moment, but you change the tone, you change the tempo, you change the energy a little bit, and you transition into what you're going to be doing next. Some personalities will hit a sounder. Still to come on the Peppy and Zippy morning show, and a little bit of a music trail where you could hit the tease over that, and you use the audio to separate it as a gear shift. But if you don't tease out of a great segment, you're missing an opportunity to get the audience interested in the next quarter hour. Because as soon as you go into those commercials, or even as soon as you go into the song, you've changed the programming again. And a large percentage of your audience, perhaps as many as 40 or 45% of them, are tuning you out. They're going somewhere else. So the question remains, what are you doing to bring them back? Well, what better time to promote it than when you've got them at a high point? So you're missing an opportunity if you're not constantly and regularly teasing forward and teasing similar content to what you just did. Tracy Luttrell. Tracy, it's great to hear from you. Tracy's at WHUR in Washington, D.C. Terrific. I think she's the assistant PD and music director there still. Maybe program director by now. I would have made her program director by now. But Tracy says, how long after the hook should you pay off with a full story? Well, Tracy, the hook and the payoff are related. They're in the same break. The hook is part of the story. The hook, I think you might be talking about the tease. And this is kind of getting into some semantics and different labels. But the tease and the hook are different. The tease is what gets you to a segment. The hook gets you to the payoff, gets you through the segment. So teases and hooks are similar. They're both designed to create curiosity and interest, but they have very specific reasons to exist, and there's some significant differences between the two. So a tease, I might tease you 6 or 8 or 10 minutes before you're doing the next segment. And this is all in the art of the tease as well, about how to time the tease and how to use a tease based on how far out the content is going to be delivered. So, you may be doing a tease and saying in 8 minutes, what's the Child Protective Services is probably going to be making a call to my wife and I as soon as our kids learn to use the phone. We'll tell you that story in 8 minutes. Okay, and then the story that you start in 8 minutes, that gets you to the hook. You start that story in 8 minutes, and the cool thing about having little kids is you can totally lie to them, but not for bad, only for good. Here's what we've been doing. We got 2 little kids, and you go on and you tell them the story. And that hook points you to the payoff. And the payoff is the stories that you tell about what you did to lie to your kids. So the difference between the hook and the payoff of the story, within the story, there's 5 steps in storytelling. Starts with a hook. Second step is the setup. Third step is the dress up. The fourth is the payoff. And the fifth is the blackout. Those are all described in great detail on my website and also in the seminar, Storytelling Basics, if you want to get more details on that. And the hook doesn't have to be that close to the payoff. It can be a longer story. It can be a shorter story.
Right. I want to just kind of stop it there. Very cool. So if you do want to just get a little bit more knowledge, these are cool Q&A sessions from Tracy Johnson. As you can see, you can just follow him there on YouTube. Might as well just subscribe there while I'm at it. Right, and then so great, a little bit more insight as to what it is that we pull from Tracy Johnson. We actually have in the textbook, and we actually obviously include in your learning there as well. All right, I'm going to stop it there. If there is any, I'm just going to start that share over there. If there are any questions, please, then just let me know. Reach out, do your work, be productive, and have a great week ahead.